Hello and welcome. Today we're going to learn how to make some devil's food cake. This was one of my grandma's favorite recipes to make. Please preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 180 degrees Celsius and let's get started. You need an 8-inch square pan that's 20 centimeters. If it's not nonstick, you'll want to grease and flour it or spray it with some cooking spray. So the first step is to mix together all the dry ingredients. In a large bowl, we're going to mix together 1 cup of flour. That's 150 grams, and I'm using all-purpose or plain flour. I don't need cake flour. You don't need specialty flour for this. Then we're going to add in 3/4 of a cup of sugar. That's 150 grams. If you want it sweeter, you can add another 1/4 of a cup or 50 grams of sugar. Next, you want to add in 1/2 cup of cocoa powder, and that's 40 grams. You can use whatever type of cocoa powder you like. Traditionally, the cheapest kind was used. This isn't an expensive cake to make, but it's also delicious. Cocoa powder tends to be really lumpy, so that's why a sifter is really important, but if you don't have one, you can use a whisk or a fork. Next, you want to add in 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, that's 3 grams, and to that 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 2.5 grams. You can use baking soda here instead of baking powder because the acid in the cocoa powder reacts with the basic ingredients in baking soda. If you don't have any baking soda, you can substitute this for 1 teaspoon or 4 grams of baking powder. You want to whisk this together until it's well combined, and then you are going to set it aside. Now let's move on to the wet ingredients. In a large bowl, we're going to add 1 large egg, that's 50 grams. To that, we're going to add in some milk. We're going to add 3/4 of a cup of milk, 180 milliliters. You could use some buttermilk and make this really tangy and it's wonderful. Next, add in 1/4 cup of oil, that's 60 milliliters, and you can add any type of oil you like as long as it's cooking oil. Then add in 1 teaspoon of vanilla or 5 milliliters. If you don't have any vanilla, it's okay to skip it completely. It just adds a subtle hint to the taste of the cocoa and just brings out the undertones of the flavor. You want to mix this all together until it's well combined. You're going to add your wet to your dry ingredients, and you're just going to stir it until there are no more lumps. Now at first, cocoa powder does not want to absorb liquid. It seems to just sit there, but just keep stirring and I promise you it will come together. This should be a relatively thin batter, kind of like a cake batter out of a box mix. It will take you about 1 to 2 minutes to stir this by hand, and of course you can use a hand mixer or you can even use a stand mixer. You just don't want to overbeat the recipe. It should be very thin and look exactly like this. Once you get to this stage, you're going to pour it into your pan. And yes, you may have noticed that I am using a disposable pan, even though I showed you to use a regular cake pan. The reason why is I'm giving this away to my mother. My mom used to get this from my grandmother for birthdays and special occasions when she was growing up, so I'm going to hopefully surprise her. When it comes to chocolate cake, you do not want to overbake it because it will dry it out. This cake is a little more forgiving than others because of the oil will help it keep it moist. When you overbake chocolate cake, it becomes very dry, crumbly, and you just don't taste the cocoa. So just really keep an eye on that temperature. Bake 30 to 40 minutes or until a toothpick inserted in the center comes out clean. The center should read between 190 degrees Fahrenheit and 210 degrees Fahrenheit, or 88 degrees Celsius and 99 degrees Celsius. Now it is typical for this cake to crack. Let it cool completely before you ice it. We are going to make a powdered sugar glaze because that's what my grandma used to do. Now I'm going to show you how my grandma used to ice a devil's food cake. She always did a powdered sugar glaze. She used 1 cup of powdered sugar, and that's about 125 grams. To that, she added 1 tablespoon of cocoa powder, 5 grams, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1.25 grams, and then 1 to 2 tablespoons, maybe 3 tablespoons of milk. That's between 15 to 45 milliliters. At first, it doesn't want to come together. Again, that cocoa doesn't want to absorb it, and you're going to be tempted to add more liquid, but all of a sudden it will start absorbing those liquids. So don't add a lot of milk at once. Keep stirring it until you really have it combined, because you can add too much milk and make it runny. If that does happen, just add some more powdered sugar and that will help balance it out. Make sure that cake is cold before you put the icing on, because if not, it'll just all slide to the edges. And then you just pour it on top and you spread it out. All those cracks will now disappear. And the one good thing about those cracks that happen in this type of cake is some of this powdered sugar glaze will seep down inside there and it'll just make it taste even more better. And you just want to spread it out until it's a nice even layer, and then it will go from this really nice shiny glossy top to this matte finish. Once it gets to that stage, you know it's ready to cut into and eat. See how shiny it is right now? You want to wait, because if you do cut into it right now, it'll just all slide off the cake. It should look like this. If you notice, it's a very nice matte finish and the shine isn't as brilliant as it was just a few minutes ago. At this point, you can cover it and you can store it in the freezer, or you can take it to your family and friends. And this is what one of the pieces looks like. It is a very nice tender cake and just lovely to eat. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. Here are your ingredients if you want to follow along. Thank you for visiting us at jacksonsjob.com, and as always, happy baking.